The black Lincoln Continental rolled slowly through the iron gates of Westchester Memorial Cemetery, its tires crunching on wet gravel as rain pattered against the windshield. Behind the wheel sat Salvatore the Razor Romano, his weathered face a monument to a life built on power and fear. At 72, the once feared mafia boss still commanded respect with merely a glance from those piercing blue eyes, though few outside certain circles remembered the blood that had earned him his nickname decades ago. He parked near the crest of the hills where angel statues stood sentinel over the departed. For a long moment he sat motionless, studying the bouquet of white roses on the passenger seat beside the gleaming Colt .45 pistol. 10 years. 10 years since they'd lowered his only son into the cold ground. The anniversary never became easier. Salvatore tucked the gun into his tailored Armani jacket and gathered the flowers. The cemetery spread before him in neat rows of granite and marble, the headstones glistening under the persistent drizzle. His Italian leather shoes sank slightly into the sodden grass as he made his familiar pilgrimage toward the eastern slope where Anthony rested. From a distance, Salvatore spotted movement by his son's grave. He slowed his pace, narrowing his eyes. A woman knelt there, her dark hair falling around her face as she wept. Beside her stood a small boy, perhaps 9 years old, methodically placing pebbles atop the headstone. Anger flashed through him like lightning. This place, this day belonged to him alone. Who were these strangers intruding upon his private grief? He approached with the quiet menace that once made rival families tremble. "Who are you?" His voice cut through the rain's whisper. "And why are you at my son's grave?" The woman's head snapped up, revealing a young face, perhaps 28, with startled brown eyes rimmed red from crying. She wore a worn jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed boots that spoke of a life far removed from Salvatore's world of luxury penthouses and private clubs. "I'm sorry," she stammered, rising quickly and pulling the boy protectively behind her. "We didn't mean to intrude. We were just leaving." Salvatore blocked their path, his substantial frame immovable as stone. "That wasn't my question." The boy peered around the woman, studying Salvatore with curious eyes. Eyes that were a startling, familiar blue. "My name is Emma Reyes," she said, straightening her shoulders despite her obvious fear. "This is Lucas." Salvatore's gaze moved between them, lingering on the boy whose features stirred something in his memory. "You didn't answer why you're here." Emma hesitated, glancing at the headstone where Anthony James Romano, 1988-2015, was etched in elegant script beneath a simple cross. "I knew Anthony," she finally said. "We were friends." Salvatore's face remained impassive, though his mind raced. Anthony had kept his life deliberately separate from his father's. Had rejected the family business to become an art teacher at a public school, a decision that had created a rift Salvatore had never managed to bridge before the car accident took his son's life. "Anthony never mentioned you?" His tone made it an accusation. "That doesn't surprise me," Emma replied with unexpected boldness. "He kept many things from you." The boy tugged at Emma's sleeve. "Mama, is this man sad too?" "Mama." The word struck Salvatore like a physical blow. He studied the child more carefully now, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the shape of his jaw, those eyes, Anthony's eyes. "Emma," Salvatore said, his voice deceptively soft. "Who is this boy?" Rain streamed down her face, mingling with fresh tears. "Lucas," she said, pulling the child closer, "is Anthony's son." The world tilted beneath Salvatore's feet. The roses slipped from his grasp, white petals scattering across the mud. Anthony's son, a grandson he never knew existed. "That's impossible," he whispered, though the evidence stood before him in flesh and blood. "I didn't plan to tell you like this," Emma said. "I wasn't sure I'd ever tell you at all." Salvatore's mind reeled, grasping for solid ground. "Who is the mother?" "My best friend Sarah," Emma replied, her expression hardening. "She and Anthony were together for nearly 2 years. They kept it quiet, especially from you." The name meant nothing to Salvatore, a painful reminder of how little he'd known his own son. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because you weren't there," Emma answered simply. "Anthony tried to reach out many times, but you were always busy with your empire, your other family." The accusation stung with its truth. Salvatore had always assumed there would be time later for father-son bonding after Anthony outgrew his rebellious phase and accepted his rightful place in the Romano family. "After the accident," Emma continued, "I tried to contact you. I called your office 3 times and left messages with your assistant. You never called back." Salvatore remembered those months after Anthony's death, the fog of grief he'd masked with ruthless business dealings. How many calls had he ignored? How many messages discarded as irrelevant? "Sarah died a year after Anthony." Emma's voice broke. "Cancer. Lucas was just a baby. I took him in, raised him as my own. I promised her I'd keep him safe. Safe. The implication hung between them like a specter. Mama, Lucas interrupted, impatient with adult conversation. Can we go now? I'm hungry. Salvatore couldn't tear his gaze from the boy, his grandson, his blood. He saw so much of Anthony in those features, in that restless energy. Wait, he said as Emma prepared to leave. Please. Something in his tone made her pause. I'd like to know more. Salvatore continued, choosing each word carefully. About my grandson. Emma studied him warily. Why now it's been 10 years? Because he's family. Salvatore answered, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. And family is everything. She seemed unconvinced. We need to go. Lucas has homework and I have a shift at the diner in an hour. Where do you work? Salvatore asked, already calculating his next move. Bella Luna, just off Route 9, she replied, then immediately looked as if she regretted the information. I'll be there, Salvatore said. Not a request. Emma took Lucas's hand. That's not necessary. It wasn't a question. Salvatore's tone brooked no argument, though he softened it with, please, I just want to talk. She hesitated, then nodded once before leading Lucas away through the rain. Salvatore watched them go, the boy glancing back over his shoulder with Anthony's curious eyes. Only when their car disappeared beyond the cemetery gates did Salvatore kneel to retrieve the scattered roses. He placed them gently on the grave, his hand trembling slightly as it traced his son's name carved in stone. You should have told me, Anthony, he whispered. You should have trusted me with this. He remained there in the rain long after his knees began to ache, processing the revelation that had shattered a decade of grief and resignation. A grandson, Anthony's legacy lived on. And if what Emma implied was true, perhaps Anthony's death wasn't the accident he'd been led to believe. The thought kindled a familiar fire in Salvatore's belly, the kind that had once made him the most feared man in New York. The Bella Luna diner sat like a time capsule from the 1950s at the edge of the small town, its neon sign flickering against the evening darkness. Salvatore arrived precisely when Emma's shift began, parking his Lincoln between rusted pickup trucks and modest sedans. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried onions hung in the air beneath the buzz of fluorescent lights. He chose a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance and exit, old habits ingrained from decades of watching his back. The plastic menu before him listed simple fare at prices that made him grimace. This was Anthony's world, the ordinary America his son had chosen over the wealth and power that was his birthright. Emma emerged from the kitchen, her hair now pulled back in a ponytail, a blue apron tied around her waist. She spotted him immediately, her steps faltering, before she straightened her shoulders and approached. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said. I'm a man of my word, Salvatore replied. Always have been. She glanced nervously around the half-empty diner. I can't talk now, I'm working. Then I'll wait, he said, settling more comfortably into the booth. Bring me a coffee, black. Reluctantly, she filled his cup, her hand steady despite her obvious tension. My break isn't for 3 hours. I have nowhere else to be. And so he waited, nursing his coffee as the diner filled and emptied with the dinner rush. He observed Emma's interactions with customers, noted how she remembered regulars' orders without writing them down, how her smile, though tired, seemed genuine. Occasionally, she'd glance his way, her expression guarded. 3 hours crawled by before she finally slid into the booth across from him, setting down a fresh cup of coffee and a plate with a slice of apple pie. On the house, she said. You might as well eat something after sitting here all night. Salvatore studied the offering. Where's Lucas? With my neighbor, Emma replied. Mrs. Gonzalez watches him when I work late shifts. How often do you work? 6 days a week, sometimes doubles. Her chin lifted slightly. We manage. Salvatore took a bite of the pie, surprised by its quality. You said Anthony and Sarah kept their relationship secret. Why? Emma sighed, fatigue evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. Sarah was my best friend since high school. She worked as a paralegal in Albany. She met Anthony when he was volunteering at the Community Arts Center, where she took her nephew for classes. Anthony taught art, Salvatore murmured, more to himself than to her. A talent inherited from his mother, one Salvatore had never fully understood. He was amazing with the kids. Emma continued, a softness entering her voice. Sarah fell for him immediately, but when she learned who his father was, she trailed off, her implication clear. She was afraid of me, Salvatore concluded. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Romano. The razor doesn't earn his nickname from gentle habits. Salvatore leaned forward, his voice dropping. That part of my life is over. Has been for years. Emma's skeptical expression told him she didn't believe that for a second. Anthony wanted a normal life away from all that. Sarah wanted the same. When she got pregnant, they agreed to keep it quiet until they could move away completely, maybe to the West Coast. They were planning to disappear. Salvatore realized the knowledge a fresh wound. Without telling me, can you blame them? Emma's voice had an edge. Anthony told me stories about growing up as your son, the fear, the violence, the men who came to your house with blood on their clothes. He didn't want that for his child. The truth landed like blows, each word stripping away the comfortable fiction Salvatore had constructed about his relationship with his son. What happened after the accident? He asked, shifting the conversation. Emma glanced at the clock on the diner wall, aware of her break's limitations. Sarah was devastated. She moved in with me for a while. Then she found out she was sick. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She made me promise to raise Lucas to keep him safe. Safe from what? Salvatore pressed. From me. Not just you, Emma replied, hesitation evident in her voice. Before he died, Anthony was investigating something dangerous. Salvatore went very still. What kind of investigation? I don't know all the details. He was working with a journalist named Carter Wilson. Something about corruption in Albany connected to a construction project. Sarah believed, Emma paused, lowering her voice. She believed Anthony's accident wasn't an accident at all. Salvatore's hand tightened around the coffee cup. What evidence did she have? The police report had inconsistencies. The witness who called it in disappeared, and Anthony had received threatening phone calls in the weeks before. Emma's eyes met his directly. Sarah tried to look into it, but then she got sick. After she died, I focused on raising Lucas. Keeping him safe meant keeping a low profile. Until today, Salvatore observed. Today was an exception, Emma acknowledged. Lucas wanted to visit his father's grave on the anniversary. I didn't expect you to be there. I've never missed an anniversary, Salvatore said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared connection to Anthony hanging between them. I want to meet him properly, Salvatore finally said. Lucas, my grandson. Emma's protective instinct flared visibly. I don't think that's a good idea. He's my blood, Salvatore insisted, a hint of the old authority creeping into his voice. Blood doesn't entitle you to anything, Emma countered. Where were you when he had nightmares about a father he barely remembers? Where were you when he started school? When he broke his arm falling from the monkey bars? I was there. Not you. Her loyalty to the boy impressed Salvatore even as it frustrated him. I didn't know he existed. And now that you do, what do you want from him, from us? Emma challenged. To know him, Salvatore answered simply. To be part of his life. Emma studied him, searching for deception. Lucas is a sensitive boy. He loves art like his father. He asks questions about Anthony sometimes, and I tell him what I can. But he has a good life, a normal life. I won't let you disrupt that with your world. I'm not asking to, Salvatore said, but he deserves to know his heritage, his family. Your kind of family is exactly what Anthony was protecting him from. Salvatore felt an old anger stirring. You don't know anything about my family. I know enough, Emma replied. Your daughter Sophia cut ties with you years ago, just like Anthony did. That tells me everything I need to know. The mention of Sophia was unexpected, a fresh wound. His daughter, now a successful attorney in Manhattan, had walked away after a particularly brutal argument 6 years ago. Her parting words still haunted him. You've never been a father, Salvatore, just a boss who expected obedience. People change, Salvatore said, though the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Do they? Emma's skepticism was palpable. Their conversation was interrupted by the cook calling Emma's name. Her break was over. I have to get back to work, she said, sliding out of the booth. Salvatore reached for his wallet, extracting several $100 bills. For Lucas, he said, placing them on the table. For expenses. Emma's expression hardened. She pushed the money back toward him. We don't need your money. Don't be proud, Salvatore insisted. Let me help. Help? Emma gave a small, bitter laugh. You think throwing money solves problems. Anthony rejected your money because he knew what it cost. I'm doing the same. She walked away, leaving Salvatore with his untouched cash and cooling coffee. He watched her move among the tables, efficient and unremarkable in her blue uniform. No one in this diner would guess that this ordinary waitress was raising the grandson of one of New York's most notorious former crime bosses. As night deepened outside the window, Salvatore remained in his booth, turning over Emma's revelations. If what she said was true, if Anthony's death wasn't an accident, then someone had taken his son from him. The thought awoke something primal in Salvatore's chest, a sleeping dragon of vengeance he thought long retired. He was so absorbed in thought that he almost missed the black sedan that cruised slowly past the diner's windows, its tinted glass revealing nothing of its occupants. It passed once, then returned parking across the street with its headlights extinguished. Decades of survival instinct put Salvatore on high alert. He watched as a man emerged from the vehicle raising what appeared to be a camera with a telephoto lens aimed at the diner's windows. Cold dread settled in Salvatore's stomach. Someone was watching Emma, perhaps watching Lucas. He left cash for his coffee and stepped outside into the cool night air, using the shadows at the edge of the parking lot for cover. The man with the camera was still there, documenting everyone who entered or left the diner. When Emma appeared in the window, clearing a table near the front, the camera clicked rapidly. Salvatore's blood chilled. It couldn't be coincidence that surveillance began the very day he reconnected with Anthony's son. Someone knew. Someone was watching. And if Anthony's death truly was murder, then Lucas and Emma could be in danger simply from their association with him. He retreated to his car, mind already formulating plans. He would need help, trusted allies. He would need to protect Emma and Lucas while he investigated Anthony's death. He would need to become at least temporarily the man he once was. Salvatore started the Lincoln's powerful engine, keeping his lights off as he circled behind the diner. He would wait for Emma's shift to end, ensure she made it home safely. Tomorrow he would begin making calls, reactivating old connections. For the first time in years, the razor would emerge from retirement. As he settled into wait, he pictured Lucas's face so like Anthony's. His grandson, his legacy, his blood. "I failed you once, Anthony," he whispered into the darkness. "I won't fail your son." 3 hours later, Salvatore followed Emma's modest Toyota at a discreet distance as she drove home after her shift. The black sedan was nowhere in sight, but Salvatore took no chances memorizing the route to her small apartment complex on the outskirts of town. He watched until her lights came on in a second-floor unit, until a curtain parted briefly as she checked the parking lot below. Only then did he drive away, heading back to his Manhattan penthouse. There was much to be done, phone calls to make, records to search, a grandson to protect, and perhaps a son to avenge. Emma Reyes bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. Something had pulled her from sleep, some noise she couldn't place. She glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. Beside her bed, the baby monitor that's still connected to Lucas's room remained silent. Then she heard it again, a soft scraping at the front door. Moving silently, she slipped from bed and reached for the baseball bat she kept nearby, a habit from years of living in neighborhoods where rent was cheap for a reason. She crept down the hallway, pausing at Lucas's door to confirm he was still asleep, peaceful and unaware. The scraping sound came again, followed by the distinct click of a lock turning. Someone was picking her front door. Emma's hands trembled on the bat. She backed toward Lucas's room, mind racing. Should she call the police? Salvatore, Romano, neither option appealed for entirely different reasons. The decision was made for her when the door swung open silently. A dark figure slipped inside, moving with practiced quiet. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, Emma could make out a man in dark clothing wearing gloves. She gripped the bat tighter, positioning herself between the intruder and Lucas's room. As the man moved toward the living room, Emma reached for the nearest lamp and switched it on. The sudden light froze the intruder. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with cold eyes and a face that might have been handsome in other circumstances. "Get out!" Emma hissed, raising the bat. "Now!" The man smiled, unperturbed by her threat. "Emma Reyes," he said, his voice disconcertingly pleasant. "We need to have a conversation about your recent visitor." "Get out or I call the police," she warned, though the nearest phone was in the kitchen beyond his position. "No police," the man replied calmly. "That would complicate things for everyone." He glanced around the apartment, taking in the modest furnishings, the framed photos of Lucas on the wall. Cozy place. The boy looks just like his father. Ice flooded Emma's veins. "Who are you? What do you want?" "Consider me a messenger," he said, removing an envelope from his jacket and placing it on her coffee table. "A reminder to stop digging into the past. Some graves should remain undisturbed." "I don't know what you're talking about," Emma insisted, though fear clawed at her throat. "Don't you—" The man's gaze hardened. "Today's cemetery visit. Your conversation with Salvatore Romano. Old memories being stirred up where they should stay buried." Emma's grip on the bat tightened. "How do you know about that?" "We know everything, Ms. Reyes," he replied with disturbing confidence. "We've been watching you for years. You and the boy. As long as you kept quiet, lived your ordinary little life, there was no problem. But now, he shook his head in mock disappointment. Now you've involved the razor. That changes the equation. Leave my son alone, Emma said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Your son, the man laughed softly. We both know he isn't yours, don't we? He belongs to a legacy much older and bloodier than you can imagine. A floorboard creaked behind Emma. She turned to see Lucas standing in the hallway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Mama, he called, his voice small with confusion. Who's that man? The intruder's attention shifted to Lucas, his expression changing to something that made Emma's blood run cold. Hello, Lucas, he said with false warmth. Your grandfather sends his regards. Emma lunged forward, swinging the bat wildly. Stay away from him. The man easily sidestepped her attack, his training evident in his fluid movement. Temper, he admonished. I'm not here to hurt anyone, not tonight. He backed toward the door. Read the note, heed the warning, keep the old man away, or next time won't be so pleasant. He slipped out as silently as he'd entered, leaving Emma trembling with rage and terror. Lucas ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Who was that man, Mama? Why was he in our house? Emma dropped the bat and held him close, her mind racing. No one important, baby. Just someone lost who came to the wrong apartment. But over his head, her eyes fixed on the envelope on her coffee table. With shaking hands, she opened it after sending Lucas back to bed with reassurances. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 9 words typed in stark black letters. Stop digging or the kid pays the price. Below the message was a photo of Lucas at school taken that very day from the playground. Emma's legs gave way, and she sank to the floor, the warning clutched in her hand. Without conscious thought, she reached for her phone and dialed the number Salvatore had pressed into her palm as he left the diner. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting for her call. They were in my home, she whispered, terror strangling her voice. They threatened Lucas. Salvatore's response was immediate and absolute. Pack a bag, essentials only. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I can't just leave, Emma protested weakly. My job, Lucas's school. None of that matters if you're dead, Salvatore replied, his tone brooking no argument. 30 minutes, Emma. Be ready. The line went dead. Emma sat frozen for several seconds before survival instinct kicked in. She moved with urgent purpose, packing clothes, medications, Lucas's favorite stuffed bear, the photo album with pictures of Anthony and Sarah, the emergency cash she kept hidden in a hollowed-out book. Exactly 30 minutes later, Salvatore's Lincoln pulled into the apartment complex parking lot. He wasn't alone. A second car followed, a nondescript sedan driven by a bull-necked man with watchful eyes. Salvatore came to her door, his expression grim, when she showed him the warning note. My associate Marcus will drive your car, he said, nodding toward the man now waiting by her Toyota. You and Lucas come with me. Where are we going? Emma asked, clutching Lucas's hand as the sleepy boy blinked in confusion. Somewhere safe, Salvatore promised. His gaze softened when it fell on Lucas, who was studying him with Anthony's curious eyes. Hello, Lucas. I'm your grandfather. Lucas looked up at Emma for confirmation. When she nodded, he extended his small hand with solemn politeness. Nice to meet you, sir. Salvatore's weathered face transformed as he took the tiny hand in his. For a fleeting moment, Emma glimpsed the man Anthony might have known in his earliest years, before power and violence hardened him beyond recognition. The pleasure is mine, Salvatore replied with surprising gentleness. Then the moment passed and the formidable razor returned. We need to move, now. As they drove through the darkness toward Manhattan, Lucas eventually falling asleep against Emma's side, she studied Salvatore's profile illuminated by passing streetlights. The man she'd feared and avoided for years was now their only protection. Anthony would be horrified by the irony. Who are they? She finally asked. The people threatening us. Salvatore's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't know yet, but I will find out. This is because I told you about Anthony's investigation, isn't it? Possibly, Salvatore conceded. Or because someone doesn't want me to discover I have a grandson. Either way, they made a serious mistake. What mistake? Emma asked, dreading the answer. Salvatore's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead, but his voice dropped to a register that sent chills down Emma's spine. They threatened my family, he said simply. No one does that and lives to boast about it. Emma glanced down at Lucas sleeping peacefully, unaware of the dangerous world closing in around them. She had promised Sarah she would keep him safe, give him a normal life. Now that promise seemed impossible to keep. What have I done? She whispered. Salvatore glanced at her, something like compassion crossing his features. You did what any mother would do. You protected your child. Now let me do the same. As dawn broke over the city, the Lincoln crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, carrying them toward an uncertain future, entangled with a past that refused to stay buried. Behind them, Marcus followed in Emma's car, ensuring no one trailed their small convoy. Emma gazed at the Manhattan skyline golden in the morning light. Somewhere in that concrete jungle was the answer to Anthony's death, the threat to Lucas's life, and perhaps, though, she scarcely dared hope a path to safety. Beside her, Lucas stirred, opening eyes so like his father's. "Mama, where are we going?" Emma smoothed his tousled hair. "Somewhere safe, baby. Just for a little while." With Grandpa, Lucas asked, the word strange and new on his tongue as he glanced at Salvatore's imposing figure behind the wheel. "Yes," Emma replied, meeting Salvatore's gaze in the rearview mirror. "With your grandfather." A silent understanding passed between them. Whatever their differences, whatever the past held, they shared one absolute truth. They would both die before letting harm come to Anthony's son. The Razor's Legacy, Part 2. Shadows of the Past. The morning sun glinted off the glass towers of Manhattan as Salvatore's Lincoln Continental crossed the city toward his penthouse in the Upper East Side. Emma gazed upward at the imposing skyscraper symbols of a world so different from her modest existence in Westchester. Beside her, Lucas pressed his face to the windows, eyes wide with wonder at the urban canyon. "Is this where you live, Grandpa?" he asked, the term still new and uncertain on his tongue. Salvatore glanced in the rearview mirror, something softening in his weathered face. "Yes, on the very top floor. You can see the entire city from there." The building itself was an exercise in understated wealth, its limestone facade suggesting old money, rather than the more ostentatious glass monuments that dominated the newer skyline. A uniformed doorman rushed forward as Salvatore pulled into the private entrance, his face registering momentary surprise at the presence of passengers before schooling his features into professional neutrality. "Welcome back, Mr. Romano," he said, opening the car door. "Shall I have your guests announced?" "That won't be necessary, James," Salvatore replied. "They'll be staying with me for a while." Emma noticed how the doorman's eyes widened slightly at this unprecedented development. She clutched Lucas's hand tighter as they followed Salvatore into a private elevator, accessed by a keycard and fingerprint scan. "Your security is very thorough," she observed as the elevator ascended swiftly. "Necessary precautions," Salvatore replied without elaboration. "The penthouse is secure. You'll be safe there." The elevator doors opened directly into a magnificent foyer of marble and dark wood. Beyond floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of Central Park, the green rectangle bordered by the city's architectural grandeur. The apartment itself was surprisingly tasteful, furnished in rich leather and antiques that spoke of heritage rather than showmanship. Lucas gasped at the view, dropping Emma's hand to rush toward the windows. "Mama, look, you can see everything." Emma followed more cautiously, taking in the surroundings with apprehension. This was the lair of the Razor, the place where a man who had ordered countless deaths now lived in apparent respectable retirement. Salvatore watched them, both hands clasped behind his back. "Marcus will bring up your bags shortly. I've arranged the East guest suite for you. It has 2 bedrooms and its own bathroom." Emma nodded, still overwhelmed. "Thank you, this is very generous." Salvatore waved away her gratitude. "Your family now." He checked his watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Emma earned in 2 years. "I need to make some calls. Make yourselves comfortable. The kitchen is fully stocked. Lucas, there's a television in the den if you'd like to watch cartoons." With that, he disappeared down a hallway, leaving Emma and Lucas alone in the opulent space. "He doesn't seem scary," Lucas whispered once Salvatore was out of earshot. "Not like you said." Emma smoothed his hair absently. "People aren't always what they seem, honey. Remember that." In his wood-paneled study, Salvatore closed the door and reached for a phone, unlike his sleek smartphone. This one was an older model secured against surveillance with connections that bypassed standard telecommunications networks. He dialed a number from memory one he hadn't used in years. A gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. "This better be important." "Frank," Salvatore said. "It's me." A long pause followed. "The Razor, I thought you were retired." Frank Costello had been Salvatore's consigliere for over 30 years before they both stepped away from the life nearly a decade ago. Now in his late 60s, Frank had retreated to a comfortable existence of fishing and grandchildren in Connecticut. Or so the official story went. "I need you," Salvatore said simply. Another pause. "Is this a social call or business?" "Family business." Salvatore replied, the phrase carrying significant weight in their shared lexicon. My son. Anthony's been dead 10 years, Frank reminded him, voice softening slightly. They had both attended the funeral, one of the few occasions where genuine grief had pierced Salvatore's carefully maintained exterior. His death might not have been an accident. The words hung in the air between them, laden with implication. Explain. Salvatore did, relaying everything Emma had told him about Anthony's investigation, the inconsistencies in the police report, the threatening calls before his death. He finished with the revelation about Lucas and the break-in at Emma's apartment. Frank's breathing was the only sound for several moments after Salvatore concluded. You're sure the boy is Anthony's? One look at him would convince you, Salvatore replied. He has Anthony's eyes, my eyes. And now someone's threatening them. Frank's voice hardened. Who? That's what I need you to find out. Salvatore moved to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled before him. I need the police report on Anthony's accident. I need everything on this journalist Carter Wilson. And I need information on any major construction projects in Albany around the time of Anthony's death. You're pulling me back in, Frank observed, though without real resentment. Just information gathering, Salvatore assured him. Nothing more. Frank snorted. When has it ever been just information gathering with you, old friend? Salvatore didn't answer directly. Can you come to the penthouse tomorrow morning? I'll be there by 9, Frank promised. And Salvatore, watch your back. If someone's been watching the woman and child all these years, they've been watching you too. After ending the call, Salvatore stood at the window, feeling the weight of his years and decisions pressing down upon him. For a decade, he had accepted the official explanation of Anthony's death, buried his grief in business dealings, and continued his gradual transition into legitimate enterprises. The thought that he might have missed something, that his son's death might not have been an accident, filled him with a cold rage he hadn't experienced in years. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Emma stood in the doorway, her expression troubled. Lucas is watching TV, she said. We need to talk. Salvatore gestured toward the leather armchair opposite his desk. Come in. Emma sat, her posture rigid with tension. I need to understand what's happening. Who was that man in my apartment? How did they find us so quickly? What do they want? I don't have those answers yet, Salvatore admitted. I've asked someone I trust to help investigate. But I need to know everything you remember about Anthony's research, this journalist, anything that might point us toward who's behind this. Emma rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Anthony was careful. He didn't tell Sarah much for her protection. I know he was meeting with Carter Wilson regularly. Something about financial irregularities in a major development project. Anthony discovered it through one of his students whose father worked in the permit office. What was the student's name? Salvatore pressed. I don't remember. It was 10 years ago and I only heard pieces from Sarah. Emma leaned forward. But there was something else. After Anthony died, Sarah received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a flash drive with some financial documents and a handwritten note that said, AR was right. She thought it came from the journalist, but she couldn't reach him. What happened to the flash drive? Emma's expression grew distant. Sarah hid it. She never told me where. She was paranoid in those final months, convinced someone was watching her. After she died, I looked everywhere but never found it. Salvatore considered this information. And the journalist, did Sarah ever meet him? Once at Anthony's funeral. He kept his distance, but Sarah recognized him from Anthony's description. A few weeks later, when she tried to contact him, his number was disconnected, his apartment empty. The pieces were beginning to align in Salvatore's mind, a pattern emerging from the fragments. Someone silenced him too. Emma nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Sarah believed that. It's why she was so careful, why she made me promise to keep Lucas away from your world. The unspoken accusation hung between them. That Anthony had died because of his connection to Salvatore, that the sins of the father had visited the son. My world has changed, Salvatore said quietly. I've changed. Have you? Emma challenged. Making phone calls on secret phones, bringing in old associates? It looks to me like you're slipping right back into being the razor. Salvatore's expression hardened. If that's what it takes to protect Lucas, to find who killed my son, then yes, I'll become whatever is necessary. That's exactly what Anthony feared, Emma whispered. Their conversation was interrupted by Lucas appearing at the doorway, his face alight with excitement. Mama, Grandpa, come see. There's a real movie theater in the other room. Salvatore's stern features softened immediately. It's just a screening room. Would you like to watch a film there later? Lucas nodded enthusiastically. Can we watch Star Wars? Dad liked Star Wars. Mom told me. The casual mention of Anthony sent a visible pang through Salvatore. Yes, he said, his voice rougher than before. Anthony loved those films. I took him to see the original when he was about your age. Emma watched the exchange with mixed emotions. The genuine connection forming between Lucas and Salvatore was undeniable, yet she couldn't forget who this man truly was beneath the grandfatherly exterior. A killer, a criminal, a man whose very name had once made other men tremble. Lucas, why don't you explore the apartment a bit more? She suggested. I need to finish talking with your grandfather. Once Lucas had bounded away, his natural resilience temporarily overcoming the trauma of the night before Emma turned back to Salvatore. What's our next move? Salvatore respected her direct approach. We wait for Frank's information. Then we decide who to approach first. In the meantime, I've arranged for additional security. Marcus will remain on site. No one enters this building without my knowledge. Emma nodded, accepting the necessity of these precautions despite her misgivings. And Lucas, he can't stay cooped up here indefinitely. He has school friends. One day at a time, Salvatore counseled. Let's identify the threat first. Then we can establish a more permanent arrangement. As Emma left the study, Salvatore returned to the window. The city below continued its relentless pace, unaware of the storm gathering in the penthouse above. He had been many things in his long life: soldier, capo, boss, businessman. Now he was adding a new role, grandfather. And for the first time in many years, he felt fear, not for himself, but for the small boy with Anthony's eyes. Frank Costello arrived precisely at 9 the next morning, looking every inch the retired consigliere in his tailored suit and camel hair coat. Despite his 68 years, he moved with the vigor of a much younger man, his shrewd eyes missing nothing as he entered the penthouse. Salvatore met him in the foyer, the two old friends clasping hands in a greeting that spoke of decades of shared history, both glorious and blood-soaked. You look good, Frank observed. Retirement suits you. And you look like you've been waiting for my call, Salvatore replied with the hint of a smile. Too well dressed for a man who supposedly spends his days fishing. Frank shrugged. Old habits. They retreated to Salvatore's study, where Frank produced a leather portfolio containing the results of his overnight investigation. I still have friends in useful places, he explained, spreading documents across Salvatore's desk. The police report on Anthony's accident, the medical examiner's findings, and everything I could find on Carter Wilson. Salvatore examined the police report first, his experienced eye immediately noting irregularities. No photographs of the accident scene, no witness statements apart from the initial 911 caller, who conveniently disappeared before detectives could interview him, Frank added. The responding officer noted evidence of a second vehicle involved, yet the official report concludes single-car accident, driver lost control. And the medical examiner, Frank's expression darkened. Blood alcohol level of 0.14, well above legal limit. Salvatore looked up sharply. Anthony didn't drink. Not since college. Exactly, Frank agreed. And here's where it gets interesting. I had a contact pull the original toxicology report. He slid another document forward. Different numbers. Blood alcohol, 0.02, barely a single drink. Someone altered the official report. Salvatore's hands tightened on the papers, crinkling them at the edges. And Carter Wilson, freelance journalist specialized in political corruption, disappeared approximately 3 weeks after Anthony's death. His apartment was found empty, rent paid through the month. No credit card activity, no phone records, nothing since October 2015. Frank paused. His body was found 6 months later in the Hudson River, identified through dental records. Ruled suicide. Convenient, Salvatore observed grimly. There's more, Frank continued. I looked into major construction projects in Albany around that time. One stood out. The Riverside Development, a billion-dollar project to revitalize the waterfront district, mixed-use commercial and residential. Primary developer was Sterling Enterprises. Salvatore's expression hardened. James Langston. Frank nodded grimly. The very same. James Langston had been Salvatore's rival in the old days, a vicious competitor in both legitimate and illegitimate businesses. Unlike Salvatore, who had gradually shifted toward legitimate enterprises, Langston had made a more abrupt transition, reinventing himself as a respectable developer while maintaining his criminal connections more discreetly. The project faced significant delays in 2015 due to permit issues, Frank continued. Then suddenly all obstacles disappeared. Construction began in November 2015. 1 month after Anthony's death, Salvatore noted the pieces aligning in his mind and the journalist's disappearance. The timing suggests Anthony and Wilson uncovered something about the Riverside project, Something worth killing for. A soft knock interrupted them. Emma stood in the doorway, her expression guarded as she observed the spread of documents. "Lucas is asking for breakfast," she said. "I wasn't sure what was available." Salvatore gestured for her to enter. "Emma, this is Frank Costello, an old friend and advisor." Frank rose, studying Emma with calculating eyes that belied his polite smile. "Ms. Reyes, I've heard much about you." "I'm sure," Emma replied coolly, clearly understanding his former role in Salvatore's organization. "Frank has found some information about Anthony's death," Salvatore explained, sharing the highlights of their discoveries. Emma paled at the mention of altered reports and the journalist's fate. "So it's true, Sarah was right. Anthony was murdered." "It appears so," Salvatore confirmed. "And now we have a connection to James Langston and his Riverside development project." "Who is Langston?" Emma asked. Salvatore and Frank exchanged glances. "An old business rival," Salvatore said carefully. "Someone who would have benefited greatly from removing obstacles to his project." "You think this man had Anthony killed over building permits?" Emma's voice rose incredulously. "Not just permits," Frank interjected. "The Riverside project was worth billions. If Anthony and the journalist uncovered corruption kickbacks to officials, perhaps even environmental violations, that could have stopped the project completely, the motivation becomes clearer." Emma absorbed this, her expression transitioning from shock to anger. "So what do we do now?" "We need more information," Salvatore replied. "Specifically, we need to find someone who worked on the project who might talk." Frank nodded. "I'll compile a list of contractors, permit officials, anyone who might have knowledge." "And in the meantime," Emma pressed, "Lucas and I can't hide here forever." Salvatore considered their options. "I have a house on Lake George, isolated, secure. We could move there while the investigation continues." "What about your daughter?" Emma asked suddenly. "Sophia, wouldn't she want to know about Lucas?" Salvatore's expression shuddered. "Sophia and I haven't spoken in 6 years. She's Lucas's aunt," Emma insisted. "And she's a lawyer, right? Maybe she could help with the investigation." Frank raised an eyebrow at Salvatore. "She has a point. Sophia's connections in the legal world could be valuable." Salvatore's jaw tightened. "Sophia made her position clear the last time we spoke. She wants nothing to do with me or my world." "This isn't about you," Emma said firmly. "It's about her nephew, Anthony's son." The mention of Anthony struck home. Salvatore nodded reluctantly. "I'll try to contact her, but I make no promises about her response." Their conversation was interrupted by Lucas bounding into the room, his youthful energy cutting through the tension. "I'm hungry," he announced, and bored. Salvatore smiled despite himself. "Let's fix both those problems. How about pancakes and then a visit to my library? I have some books your father used to enjoy." As they left the study, Frank held Salvatore back momentarily. "Be careful, old friend. If Langston is involved, we're dealing with someone as ruthless as you once were, and he won't hesitate to eliminate any threat, even a child." Salvatore's eyes hardened. "Let him try." Sophia Romano's corner office at Preston Thorne and Associates overlooked Bryant Park, a fitting location for one of Manhattan's rising legal stars. At 34, she had already made junior partner, specializing in corporate litigation, with a side focus on pro bono work for environmental causes. Her sleek bob and tailored suits projected an image of controlled competence that had served her well in male-dominated courtrooms. When her assistant announced Salvatore Romano was in the reception area, Sophia's composed expression faltered momentarily. She hadn't seen her father in 6 years, not since the explosive argument that had ended with her walking away from the family completely. "Tell him I'm in a meeting," she instructed automatically. The assistant hesitated. "He said to tell you it's about Anthony, and that he'll wait all day if necessary." Sophia's breath caught. Anthony, her beloved older brother, gone 10 years now. What could her father possibly have to say about Anthony after all this time? Curiosity and familial obligation warred with her resolve to keep Salvatore out of her carefully constructed new life. Finally, she nodded. "Send him in and hold my calls." Salvatore entered with the quiet authority that had always defined him, though Sophia immediately noticed subtle changes in his bearing. He seemed older somehow, the weight of his years more apparent than when she'd last seen him. "Sophia," he greeted her, remaining standing until she gestured toward the visitor's chair. "What's this about Anthony?" she asked, directly bypassing pleasantries. Salvatore studied his daughter, noting how much she resembled her mother in her features, though her strength of character was undeniably his contribution. "I've discovered something. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about his death." Sophia's professional mask slipped slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Anthony had a son." The words landed like a physical blow. Sophia gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles whitening. That's impossible. I would have known. He kept it secret, from both of us. Salvatore explained, proceeding to share the entire story of meeting Emma and Lucas at the cemetery, the evidence suggesting Anthony's death was no accident, and the connection to James Langston. Sophia listened without interruption, her legal mind processing and categorizing the information, even as her emotional core reeled from the implications. When Salvatore finished, she rose and walked to the window, needing physical distance to collect her thoughts. You're telling me I have a nephew, she said finally. A 10-year-old nephew I've never met, and that Anthony was murdered. Yes, Salvatore confirmed simply. Sophia turned to face him. Why come to me now? What do you want? Your help, Salvatore admitted. Your legal expertise, your connections. We need to uncover what Anthony found, what got him killed. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You and your old consigliere, are you the razor again, father? Salvatore met her gaze unflinchingly. I'm a grandfather trying to protect his grandson, whatever that requires. Sophia laughed bitterly. Same justification, different decade. You always believed the ends justified the means. And you always saw the world in black and white, Salvatore countered. Some situations require operating in the gray. They stared at each other across the ideological divide that had separated them for years. Finally, Sophia asked, where is he, this boy Lucas? At my penthouse with his adoptive mother. I want to meet him, Sophia decided. Not for you, for Anthony. And if what you're saying about his death is true, I want justice done legally. Through the courts, not your way. Salvatore nodded, accepting her terms. Come to dinner tonight. Meet your nephew. After he left, Sophia remained at the window watching the tiny figures in the park below. A nephew, Anthony's son. The possibility of answering questions about her brother's death that had haunted her for a decade. Despite her reservations about reconnecting with her father, she couldn't walk away from this. She picked up her phone, cancel my afternoon appointments, and pull everything we have on Sterling Enterprises and James Langston. The dinner that evening was a study in cautious reconciliation. Sophia arrived at the penthouse precisely at 7, her professional armor still in place despite the family occasion. Emma observed the Romano family dynamics with fascination, noting the physical resemblance between father and daughter, alongside the emotional distance that separated them. Lucas, oblivious to the underlying tension, took to his aunt immediately. You look like the pictures of Grandma, he observed with a child's directness. Sophia's composure cracked at this innocent observation. You've seen pictures of my mother. Mama has a photo album with all sorts of old pictures, Lucas explained. There's one of my dad with his mom and sister at the beach. That's you, right? Sophia nodded, momentarily speechless. Emma intervened gently. Sarah kept everything related to Anthony. Photos, letters, mementos. She wanted Lucas to know his father's family, even if only through pictures. May I see them? Sophia asked quietly. While Emma retrieved the album, Salvatore observed his daughter's reaction with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Sophia had been devastated by Anthony's death, perhaps even more than he had been. Brother and sister had remained close, even after Anthony's estrangement from Salvatore. That Sophia had never mentioned Anthony having a serious relationship, let alone a child, confirmed how completely his son had compartmentalized his life. The evening progressed with surprising warmth as Lucas charmed his aunt with stories and questions. Sophia gradually relaxed her guard, especially when the boy displayed artistic talent, clearly inherited from Anthony, proudly showing her drawings he'd created that afternoon. After Lucas went to bed, the adults gathered in Salvatore's study to discuss strategy. Frank had joined them, bringing updates from his investigation. I've identified a potential source, he reported. Edward Crane, former city council member, who was involved in approving the Riverside project. Word is he had reservations initially, then suddenly changed his vote. A year later, he resigned from the council and took a position with Sterling Enterprises. Classic payoff, Salvatore noted. He still lives in Albany, Frank continued. Recently divorced, financial troubles, drinking problem. Vulnerable. Sophia frowned at the predatory assessment. If you're suggesting blackmail or intimidation, I'm suggesting he might talk to the right person, Frank clarified. Someone who approaches him carefully, perhaps as a sympathetic ear rather than a threat. All eyes turned to Emma. Me, she asked incredulously. Why would he talk to me? You're Anthony's son's guardian, Frank explained. A hard-working single mother seeking closure about a tragic accident that orphaned your charge. Who wouldn't want to help? It's manipulative, Sophia objected. But effective, Salvatore countered, and harmless. Emma simply approaches him, mentions Anthony's name, gauges his reaction. If he knows nothing, we've lost nothing. And if he reacts suspiciously, Emma asked, then we know he's hiding something, Frank finished. Sophia sighed, recognizing the logic despite her ethical concerns. If we do this, we do it my way. Recorded conversations, documented evidence, everything admissible in court. Salvatore and Frank exchanged glances, but nodded in agreement. There's something else, Frank added. I've been monitoring police frequencies and contacts. There's been increased activity around known Langston associates. Someone's asking questions about Emma and Lucas. Salvatore's expression darkened. Then we need to move quickly. The lake house would be safer than the city. I agree, Frank said. Isolated, defensible, fewer variables to control. Emma looked between them, the reality of their situation settling heavily upon her shoulders. When do we leave? Tomorrow, Salvatore decided. Pack whatever you and Lucas need for an extended stay. After Emma and Sophia departed, Frank remained behind with Salvatore. The old friends sat in contemplative silence, nursing glasses of 30-year Macallan. It's all coming back, isn't it? Frank observed. The planning, the strategy, the constant vigilance. I never thought I'd return to this life, Salvatore admitted, especially not because of Anthony. He hated what I did. And now you're doing it for his son, Frank noted with irony. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. If Langston is behind Anthony's death, if he threatens Lucas in any way, Salvatore let the implication hang between them. Frank studied his old friend carefully. The razor would have already ordered a hit on Langston and anyone connected to him. I'm not that man anymore. Aren't you? Frank challenged gently. The methods may have changed, the justifications evolved, but at your core, Salvatore, you're still the man who built an empire on absolute protection of what's yours. Salvatore couldn't deny the truth in Frank's assessment. The discovery of Lucas had awakened something primal in him, a fierce protectiveness he'd thought long dormant. If violence became necessary to protect his grandson, could he truly claim he wouldn't resort to his old ways? One step at a time, he said finally. First we secure them at the lake house. Then Emma approaches Crane. We gather evidence, build our case. And if Langston moves against us in the meantime, Salvatore's eyes hardened to blue ice. Then he'll discover that retirement hasn't dulled my instincts. As the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, two old warriors planned their campaign with the methodical precision that had once made them kings of New York's underworld. But this time their objective wasn't territory or profit. It was justice for a son and safety for a grandson. Whether these nobler goals would lead to nobler methods remained to be seen. The journey to Lake George the next morning proceeded with military precision. Salvatore and Frank had arranged for 3 identical black SUVs to leave the parking garage, simultaneously a simple misdirection tactic to confuse any surveillance. Emma and Lucas traveled with Salvatore in the middle vehicle, while Marcus and another trusted associate drove the decoys. Lucas, initially excited by what he perceived as an adventure, soon settled into playing games on the tablet Sophia had given him before their departure. Emma gazed out the window as Manhattan receded behind them, wondering how her simple life had transformed so dramatically in just 3 days. You're quiet, Salvatore observed after nearly an hour of silence. I'm processing, Emma replied. 3 days ago, I was a waitress worried about making rent. Now I'm in a convoy with a former mafia boss hiding from killers who may have murdered Anthony 10 years ago. Salvatore nodded, understanding her disorientation. Life changes in an instant. I learned that when they called about Anthony's accident. The shared grief created a momentary connection between them, bridging their vastly different worlds. Tell me about him, Salvatore said suddenly. Anthony, as you knew him. Emma considered the request, studying Salvatore's profile as he drove. He was kind, genuinely kind, not in a performative way. He loved teaching art to children who'd never been exposed to it before. He could be serious, introspective, but he had this smile that would suddenly break through like sunshine. Salvatore's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. His mother's smile, Isabella could light up a room that way. He talked about her sometimes, Emma offered. He missed her terribly. And me, Salvatore couldn't help asking. Did he speak of me? Emma hesitated, torn between honesty and compassion. He said you were 2 different species trying to speak the same language, that you loved each other but could never understand each other. Salvatore absorbed this with a small nod, an accurate assessment. They lapsed into silence again until Lucas spoke up from the back seat, having grown bored with his game. How much longer, Grandpa? About 2 hours, Salvatore replied. You'll like the lake house. There's a dock where we can fish and woods to explore. Cool. Lucas's enthusiasm was infectious. Did my dad like fishing? He did. Salvatore confirmed, a smile touching his lips. He caught his first base when he was about your age. Nearly fell out of the boat with excitement. Lucas beamed at this connection to his father. Can you teach me to fish too? I'd like that very much, Salvatore replied, meeting the boy's eyes in the rearview mirror. Emma watched the exchange with mixed emotions. The bond forming between Lucas and his grandfather was undeniable, yet she couldn't forget the danger that had necessitated this journey. Danger that stemmed directly from Salvatore's world regardless of his current intentions. As they traveled north through increasingly rural landscapes, Emma noticed Salvatore checking the mirrors frequently, his vigilance never faltering despite the casual conversation. Frank followed in another vehicle, maintaining radio contact at regular intervals. These men might claim retirement, but their instincts remained razor-sharp. The lake house revealed itself gradually as they descended a winding private road through dense forest. Unlike the urban opulence of the penthouse, this property embraced its natural surroundings, a sprawling lodge of stone and timber that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. The blue expanse of Lake George stretched beyond mountains rising on the opposite shore. It's beautiful, Emma admitted as they pulled up to the house. Isabella designed it, Salvatore explained, an unexpected softness in his voice. She wanted a place away from the city, away from my business, a sanctuary. They were barely settled inside when Frank received an urgent call from one of his contacts. His expression grew grave as he listened, occasionally asking clipped questions. When he ended the call, he gestured for Salvatore to follow him onto the deck away from Emma and Lucas, who were exploring the house. What is it? Salvatore asked, recognizing the tension in his old friend's bearing. Edward Crane is dead, Frank reported bluntly. Apparent suicide last night, found hanging in his garage this morning. Convenient timing, Salvatore observed grimly. Too convenient, Frank agreed. My contact in Albany PD says the scene looks staged. Crane's hands showed defensive wounds. There was a struggle before he died. Salvatore absorbed this information, its implications clear. They're eliminating loose ends. Someone warned Langston we're asking questions. We have a leak, Frank concluded. Someone knows we're investigating Anthony's death and Langston's connection. Or they've been watching Emma all along, waiting for her to make contact with me. Salvatore stared out at the placid lake, its tranquility a stark contrast to the storm gathering around them. Either way, we need to accelerate our timeline. If Crane was silenced, others will follow. What's the play? Frank asked, falling naturally into his role as consigliere. Salvatore considered their options. We need someone else connected to the Riverside project. Someone who might have worked with Anthony or the journalist. I have a few possibilities, Frank offered, but approaching them just got considerably more dangerous. Then we change tactics, Salvatore decided. Instead of approaching cautiously, we force Langston's hand, make him reveal himself. Frank raised an eyebrow. The old Salvatore would have simply had Langston eliminated. The old Salvatore didn't have a grandson to consider, he replied, or a daughter who insists on legal justice. We'll do this Sophia's way for now, but we'll need to move quickly. As they turned to re-enter the house, Salvatore caught sight of Lucas at the edge of the lake, skipping stones across the smooth surface. The boy's stance, the set of his shoulders, even the way he cocked his head in concentration, all echoed Anthony so powerfully that Salvatore felt a physical ache in his chest. We protect the boy at all costs, he said quietly. Everything else is secondary. Frank nodded his understanding. In their long history together, he had never seen Salvatore so affected by anything as he was by the discovery of his grandson. It made the old consigliere both hopeful and wary. A man with something precious to protect was potentially more dangerous than one with nothing to lose. Inside, Emma was arranging Lucas's belongings in one of the upstairs bedrooms when Salvatore found her. We need to talk, he said from the doorway. His tone alerted her immediately. What's happened? After explaining about Crane's death, Salvatore watched resolution harden in Emma's expression. This woman who had raised Anthony's son as her own was proving to have a core of steel that he couldn't help but admire. So we've lost our best lead, she concluded. For now, Salvatore acknowledged, but his death confirms we're on the right track. Langston is nervous, which means we're close to something important. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. All these years, I've lived with the suspicion that Anthony's death wasn't an accident. Sarah was convinced of it. But hearing about Crane knowing someone is actively covering up the truth even now. She took a shaky breath. It makes it real in a way it wasn't before. Salvatore remained in the doorway, respecting her space while recognizing her pain. We'll find the truth, Emma. I promise you that. And then what? She challenged, looking up at him. Say we prove Langston had Anthony killed. What happens next? You have him arrested, or do you handle it the old way? The question hung between them, direct and unavoidable. What would you want? Salvatore countered. If you could choose the consequences for the man who killed Anthony and orphaned Lucas, what justice would satisfy you? Emma held his gaze unflinching. I want him to face his crimes publicly. I want the world to know what he did. I want Lucas to someday understand that the law worked as it should, that we're not all just animals fighting for dominance. Salvatore nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll aim for. Do you mean that? Emma pressed. Or are you just telling me what I want to hear? Before Salvatore could respond, Lucas appeared in the hallway, excitement emanating from him like a physical force. Mama, Grandpa, come see, there's a tree house in the backyard. The conversation suspended. Salvatore and Emma followed Lucas outside, where indeed a weathered but sturdy treehouse stood in an ancient oak overlooking the lake. Salvatore had forgotten its existence, a project he and Anthony had built one summer when his son was 11. Can I go up? Lucas asked eagerly. Let me check it first, Salvatore said, approaching the ladder cautiously. He tested each rung before climbing up to inspect the small structure. Inside, he found dusty evidence of Anthony's childhood faded comic books, a rusted telescope initials carved into one wall. AR was here 1999. It's secure, he called down, his voice rougher than before. Come up, Lucas. As the boy scrambled up the ladder, Salvatore touched the carved initials gently. Here was tangible proof of Anthony's existence, his youth preserved in this forgotten place. When Lucas entered the treehouse, his eyes widened at the discoveries. Was this my dad's? He asked reverently, picking up one of the comics. Yes, Salvatore confirmed. We built this treehouse together when he was a bit older than you. Lucas ran his fingers over the carved initials, making the connection immediately. AR Anthony Romano. That's right. Lucas looked up at his grandfather, something profound passing between them in that moment. I wish I remembered him, the boy said simply. Salvatore placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, feeling the fragile bones beneath his palm. I'll tell you everything I remember. And together we'll make sure the world knows who Anthony Romano really was. Down below, Emma watched the interaction with tears in her eyes. Despite her reservations about Salvatore, she couldn't deny the healing taking place in that treehouse across generations of the Romano family. For Lucas's sake, she hoped it would be enough to protect them from the gathering storm. The Razor's Legacy. Part 3. Blood and Justice. Dawn broke over Lake George with golden fingers of light stretching across the water. Salvatore stood on the dock, a solitary figure in the early morning mist, watching as the sun illuminated the mountains beyond. In his 72 years, he had witnessed countless dawns, yet this one seemed particularly significant, perhaps because for the first time in decades, he had something truly worth protecting. The creak of footsteps on wooden planks alerted him to Emma's approach. She joined him at the edge of the dock, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the morning chill. You're up early, she observed quietly. Old habits, Salvatore replied. In my former life, dawn was always the safest time to think. Everyone else was exhausted from the night's activities. Emma nodded, understanding more than she wanted to about his past. Frank called. He woke me. Salvatore turned to face her. What did he say? He found Sarah's sister Rachel. She's living in Syracuse. This news jolted Salvatore, fully alert. The sister might know something about the flash drive Sarah hid. That's what Frank thought. He's arranging for her to meet us here. She should arrive this afternoon. Salvatore considered this development, calculating risks and opportunities with the strategic precision that had once made him a formidable force in New York's underworld. Does she know about Lucas? Yes, she's his aunt, technically. She and Sarah weren't close in those last years, but she did visit a few times when Lucas was a baby. After Sarah died, she sent birthday cards for a while, then stopped. Emma gazed out at the lake, her expression complicated. I think it was too painful for her. Sarah was her only family. And now she's our best lead, Salvatore concluded. She's not a lead, Emma corrected firmly. She's Lucas's family. Remember that when you meet her. Salvatore accepted the rebuke with a slight nod. Emma had proven remarkably adept at keeping him grounded, at reminding him that this investigation involved real people with real feelings, not just strategic assets to be deployed. Lucas is still asleep, he asked, changing the subject. Out like a light. The treehouse excitement wore him out. A small smile softened Emma's features. He wants to sleep up there tonight. I told him it's too cold, but he's determined. Anthony was the same way, Salvatore recalled, unexpected warmth coloring his voice. Stubborn. Once he set his mind on something, nothing could dissuade him. They stood in companionable silence as the mist burned away from the lake's surface. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, a tentative trust had begun forming between them, forged by their shared love for Lucas and their determination to uncover the truth about Anthony's death. The moment was interrupted by Salvatore's secure phone vibrating in his pocket. Frank's number. "News," Salvatore answered without preamble. "Not good," Frank replied, his voice tight. "Our surveillance picked up movement at Langston's compound early this morning. 3 vehicles left heading north. They're being careful, switching cars, taking back roads, but the trajectory is clear. They're heading toward Lake George." Ice settled in Salvatore's veins. "How long?" 3 hours, maybe 4 if they maintain their current pattern." "How did they find us?" Emma asked, having moved closer to hear the conversation. "Unknown," Frank admitted, "but they're moving with purpose. This isn't a random search pattern." Salvatore's mind raced through possibilities. The lake house wasn't officially connected to his name. It was owned through a series of shell companies, a remnant of his more paranoid days. Few people knew of its existence, and fewer still its location. Sophia, he realized suddenly, she's the weak link. Someone could have followed her from the city or traced her calls. "I've tried reaching her," Frank confirmed. No response. Alarm flared in Emma's eyes. "Is she in danger?" "Possibly," Salvatore admitted, "or compromised. Either way, we need to assume this location is blown." "Frank, what's your position?" 2 hours out with Rachel. We can meet you at the fallback location." "Do it," Salvatore ordered. "We'll leave within the hour." He ended the call, already moving toward the house with determined strides. "Emma, wake Lucas. Pack only essentials. We're leaving." "Where are we going?" she asked, matching his pace. "Another property. More remote, more secure." His expression had transformed the grandfatherly warmth replaced by the calculating coldness of the razor. "I need to make preparations. Be ready in 30 minutes." Inside the house, Salvatore moved with practiced efficiency, accessing a hidden safe behind a landscape painting in his study. From it, he retrieved cash documents and a Glock 19 handgun with spare magazines. Old instincts surfaced as he checked the weapon muscle memory, guiding his hands through the familiar ritual. When Emma entered with a sleepy Lucas, Salvatore had already concealed the gun in a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. "Ready?" he asked. Emma nodded, clutching a small duffel bag. Lucas rubbed his eyes, confusion evident on his young face. "Why do we have to leave, Grandpa? I thought we were going fishing today." Salvatore knelt to the boy's level, something he'd rarely done even with his own children. "We'll go fishing another day, Lucas. Right now we need to take a little trip. An adventure. Like in those Star Wars movies you like." Lucas brightened slightly at this comparison. "Are the bad guys coming?" Salvatore and Emma exchanged glances over the boy's head. "Something like that," Salvatore acknowledged. "But don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you or your mother." They exited through the back of the house, taking a narrow trail through dense woods rather than the main driveway. Salvatore led them to a weathered boathouse half hidden by overhanging trees. Inside, beneath a canvas cover, sat an unmarked black SUV with tinted windows. "Always have an escape route," Salvatore explained at Emma's questioning look. "Another old habit." They were on the road within minutes, taking Forest Service roads in obscure local routes instead of main highways. Salvatore drove with intense focus, checking mirrors constantly, while Emma kept Lucas distracted with games and stories in the back seat. "Who's Rachel?" Lucas asked suddenly, having overheard the name during their hasty preparations. Emma hesitated before answering. "She's your Aunt Rachel, your birth mother's sister." Lucas absorbed this new information with a child's adaptability. "Do I look like her too?" "I don't know, honey. I haven't seen her in many years." "Will she live with us now, like Grandpa?" The innocent question hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity of their situation. None of them were actually living together by choice. They were fugitives from dangerous men bound by circumstances beyond their control. "We'll see," Emma replied vaguely. "Right now, we're just going to meet her and talk." Salvatore caught her eye in the rearview mirror, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The complexity of their improvised family unit wasn't lost on either of them, nor was the uncertainty of their future. After nearly 2 hours of driving through increasingly isolated countryside, Salvatore turned onto a nearly invisible dirt road leading deep into the Adirondack wilderness. Eventually, they emerged into a clearing where a rustic hunting cabin stood beside a small, pristine pond. "What is this place?" Emma asked as they parked. "Hunting property," Salvatore replied. "Officially owned by a logging company that doesn't exist. Not even Frank knows about it. I used it during the turbulent years when sleeping in the same place twice seemed unwise." The cabin was sparse but functional with a stone fireplace, basic kitchen, 2 small bedrooms, and a generator for electricity. Salvatore checked the perimeter while Emma and Lucas settled inside, finding the pantry surprisingly well stocked with non-perishable items. "You maintain this place," Emma observed when Salvatore returned, "even though you're supposedly retired." "Paranoia is a difficult habit to break," he admitted, removing his jacket to reveal the shoulder holster and gun. He caught Emma's disapproving glance toward the weapon. "Necessary precaution." "I don't want Lucas seeing that," she insisted. Salvatore nodded, removing the holster and storing it in a high cabinet. "Frank will be here with Rachel in approximately an hour. In the meantime, we should prepare Lucas for the meeting." They found the boy exploring the cabin's main room, examining old fishing gear and worn hunting trophies on the walls. "Lucas," Emma called gently, "come sit with us for a minute. We need to talk about something important." The three gathered around the rough-hewn wooden table. Emma took Lucas's hands in hers, choosing her words carefully. "You know how I've told you stories about your birth mother, Sarah, about how she loved you very much but got sick and couldn't take care of you?" Lucas nodded solemnly. "And then you became my mom instead." "That's right. Well, Sarah had a sister named Rachel. That makes her your aunt, and she's coming here today to meet you." Lucas considered this information. "Will she know things about my birth mom? Things you don't know?" "I hope so," Emma replied honestly. "She might also know something important about your father, about what happened to him." Salvatore watched this exchange with conflicting emotions. Lucas's resilience impressed him, as did Emma's straightforward approach. No coddling, no lies, just age-appropriate truth. It was how he wished he'd raised his own children. "Is she nice?" Lucas asked finally. "I remember her being nice, yes," Emma assured him. "She used to bring you little stuffed animals when you were a baby. You probably don't remember." This detail seemed to satisfy Lucas, who nodded decisively. "Okay, I'll go make sure my room is clean before she gets here." After he left, Salvatore regarded Emma with new respect. "You handle him well. No deception, but no unnecessary fear either." "Children sense lies," Emma replied simply. "Better to give them truth they can handle than protection they can see through." Salvatore nodded thoughtfully. "Isabella used to say something similar. I didn't listen." Before Emma could respond, Salvatore's phone vibrated. A text from Frank 10 minutes out. "Moving carefully. No tail." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted immediately, tension returning as they prepared for the arrival. Salvatore retrieved his weapon, keeping it concealed but accessible. Emma busied herself making coffee, her movements betraying her nervousness. Frank's car arrived precisely when expected, approaching with lights off despite the daylight. He emerged first, scanning the clearing before opening the rear door for a thin woman with auburn hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. Rachel Davis looked nothing like Salvatore had imagined Sarah's sister. Where Emma had described Sarah as warm and vibrant, Rachel appeared brittle, her movements jerky with anxiety, her eyes darting constantly. She wore practical clothing, jeans, hiking boots, a flannel shirt under a worn jacket, but carried herself with the caution of prey in predator territory. Introductions were made in the cabin's main room. Rachel stiffened visibly when Salvatore was identified, recognition and fear flashing across her features. "I know who you are," she said, her voice higher than expected. "Everyone in certain circles knows the razor." "Former," Salvatore corrected mildly. "I've been retired for many years." Rachel didn't appear convinced. "Tell that to the men following me for the past week." This revelation sharpened everyone's attention. Frank moved closer, his demeanor professional but urgent. "You've been under surveillance. Why didn't you mention this earlier?" "Because I didn't know if I could trust you," Rachel replied bluntly. "A strange man calls, claims to represent Salvatore Romano, says it's about my dead sister. Forgive me for being cautious." Emma intervened before tensions escalated. "Rachel, thank you for coming despite your concerns. Lucas is very excited to meet you." At the mention of her nephew, Rachel's posture softened slightly. "Where is he?" "In his room. I'll get him," Emma offered, disappearing down the short hallway. Left with the two men, Rachel's guarded nearness returned. "What exactly do you want from me? Your man wasn't specific on the phone." Salvatore chose his words carefully. "Information about your sister. Specifically about a flash drive she may have hidden before her death. One containing evidence about Anthony Romano's accident." Rachel's expression shuddered. "Sarah and I weren't close near the end. After she got sick, she pushed everyone away. Became paranoid." "Not paranoid," Frank corrected. "Justifiably cautious. We have evidence Anthony's death wasn't an accident, but murder connected to a construction project he was investigating." Rachel's gaze flicked between them, calculation evident in her eyes. Before she could respond, Emma returned with Lucas. The boy approached cautiously, studying his aunt with open curiosity. "Hello, Lucas," Rachel said, her voice softening dramatically. "You've grown so much." "You remember me?" Lucas asked, surprised. "Of course. I was there the day you were born." A genuine smile transformed Rachel's face, erasing years of strain. "You look just like your mother." Lucas beamed at this connection to his birth mother. "Do you have pictures of them together?" "Some," Rachel acknowledged. "At home. I didn't bring them with me." She glanced at Frank and Salvatore. I wasn't sure what this meeting was really about. Emma suggested Lucas show Rachel around the cabin, giving the adults time to talk more freely. Once they were out of earshot, Salvatore leaned forward, intensity radiating from his still powerful frame. "Rachel, we need to be direct. Anthony and Sarah were both targeted because of what they knew about the Riverside Development Project. Lucas may still be in danger. If Sarah left any evidence, any clue about what Anthony discovered, we need to know." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Why should I trust you? For all I know, you could have been involved in their deaths." "Anthony was my son," Salvatore replied, a rare display of emotion roughening his voice. "I failed him in life. I won't fail him in death, or fail his son." Something in his sincerity must have registered with Rachel. She sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. "About 6 months before she died, Sarah came to see me. She was already sick then, though hiding it well. She gave me a small box, told me to keep it somewhere safe, and only open it if anything happened to her." Frank and Salvatore exchanged glances. "And did you?" Frank pressed. "Not right away," Rachel admitted. "After she died, I was grieving, dealing with arrangements. By the time I remembered the box, Emma had already taken Lucas. Life moved on." She hesitated. "But last year I was moving apartments and found it again. I opened it then." "What was inside?" Salvatore asked, tension evident in his controlled stillness. "A flash drive, like you said, and a letter explaining that if I was reading it, she was probably dead, and it wasn't from natural causes." Rachel's voice wavered. "I didn't believe her. The doctors said cancer. I thought grief and pain medications had made her paranoid." "Did you look at the contents of the drive?" Frank asked. Rachel nodded slowly. "Financial records mostly, construction permits, environmental impact studies. None of it made sense to me. There was also a video file." Her expression darkened. "That I understood." "What was on it?" Salvatore demanded. "A meeting between two men. One Sarah identified in her letter as James Langston. The other she didn't name but called him the councilman. They were discussing Anthony's investigation, how he'd discovered falsified environmental reports about toxic waste at the Riverside site." Rachel's hands trembled slightly. They decided he needed to be permanently discouraged. The confirmation of Anthony's murder, though expected, hit Salvatore like a physical blow. Frank placed a steadying hand on his old friend's shoulder. "Where is this flash drive now?" Frank asked. "Hidden," Rachel replied. "After I watched the video, strange things started happening. Cars parked outside my apartment. Men following me in stores. My computer was hacked. I knew then that Sarah wasn't paranoid. She was right." Her eyes locked with Salvatore's. "I made copies, hid them in different locations. Insurance." Salvatore nodded with grim approval. "Smart. One copy is nearby," Rachel continued. "I've kept it close since your man contacted me. I wasn't sure if I'd hand it over, but after seeing Lucas..." She trailed off, emotion briefly overcoming her. "We need that evidence," Frank pressed, "to bring Langston to justice, to ensure Lucas's safety." Rachel considered this. "I'll get it, but I need assurances that Lucas will be protected, that he won't be caught in whatever vendetta you're planning." "This isn't about vendetta," Salvatore insisted, though the hard glint in his eyes suggested otherwise. "It's about justice for Anthony, for Sarah, for Lucas." Their conversation was interrupted by Lucas and Emma returning, the boy chattering excitedly about the pond behind the cabin and the fish he'd spotted from the shore. Rachel's demeanor transformed again, in his presence, warmth replacing caution. "Lucas was just saying he's hungry," Emma announced. "I thought I might make sandwiches." The domestic suggestion broke the tension, redirecting their focus to immediate needs. As Emma and Rachel moved to the kitchen area, Frank drew Salvatore aside. "She's telling the truth," Frank murmured, "but not all of it. She's holding something back." Salvatore nodded almost imperceptibly. "The location of the other copies, most likely. Insurance against us as much as Langston." "Smart woman," Frank observed. "Yes." Salvatore's gaze followed Lucas as the boy helped set the table. "We need that drive, Frank. If it confirms Langston ordered Anthony's death, we can take it to the authorities." Frank raised an eyebrow. The Salvatore I knew wouldn't have bothered with authorities. The Salvatore you knew didn't have a grandson to consider, he replied quietly, or a daughter insisting on legal justice. Speaking of Sophia, have you heard from her? Frank asked, concern evident in his expression. Not since she left the penthouse yesterday. Salvatore's brow furrowed. Try her again. If there's no response, have Marcus check her apartment and office. As Frank stepped outside to make the calls, Salvatore joined the others at the table. The impromptu meal had a strangely normal quality, with Lucas dominating the conversation, peppering Rachel with questions about Sarah. Rachel answered with increasing ease, her initial guardedness melting away in the face of her nephew's innocent curiosity. Did my mom and dad love each other? Lucas asked, suddenly the question silencing the adults. Rachel smiled gently. Very much. I only met Anthony a few times, but I saw how they looked at each other. They had plans, dreams, for you especially. Lucas nodded, satisfied with this answer. Grandpa says I have my dad's eyes. Do I have anything from my mom? Her smile, Rachel replied without hesitation. Exactly her smile, and her kindness from what Emma tells me. The moment of connection was shattered by Frank bursting through the door, his usually composed demeanor visibly shaken. Salvatore, we have a problem. All heads turned toward him. Frank glanced meaningfully at Lucas, indicating the news wasn't for young ears. Lucas, Emma said smoothly, why don't you and Rachel look at that board game we found in the closet? See if all the pieces are there. Once they had moved to the far side of the cabin, Salvatore and Emma joined Frank near the door. Sophia's been taken, Frank said without preamble. Her assistant reported her missing when she didn't show for court this morning. Marcus found signs of struggle in her apartment, blood on the carpet. Emma gasped softly. Salvatore's expression hardened to granite, only a dangerous flickering in his eyes betraying the emotion roiling beneath. Langston, he stated flatly. Frank nodded. Almost certainly, there's more. Her phone was used to access your penthouse location data. That's how they traced us to the lake house. They tortured her, Emma whispered, horrified. Unlikely, Salvatore replied, his voice terrifyingly calm. Sophia is smart. She would have given them the information, quickly knowing it would buy her time. She'd assume we'd change locations once we realized she was compromised. But they still have her, Frank reminded him. Yes. Salvatore turned to stare out the window, his profile sharp against the afternoon light. Which means they want something more than just finding us. The flash drive, Emma realized. They know Rachel contacted us. They're using Sophia as leverage. Salvatore's phone buzzed in his pocket, unknown number. He answered, putting it on speaker. Romano, a smooth, cultured voice that Salvatore instantly recognized despite the decades since he'd last heard it. James Langston. You have my daughter, Salvatore replied, each word precisely controlled. Straight to business. I always appreciated that about you. Langston's tone was conversational, as if discussing a minor business transaction. Yes, Sophia is my guest, unharmed mostly. A regrettable necessity. What do you want? The evidence Sarah Davis hid. The flash drive her sister has now provided to you, in exchange for Sophia. Salvatore's eyes met Frank's. So Langston had been monitoring Rachel closely enough to know about their meeting, but not closely enough to intercept the actual handover of evidence. I need proof of life, Salvatore demanded. A rustling sound, then Sophia's voice tense but steady. Dad, don't. Her words cut off abruptly. Langston returned, satisfied. Here's how this works. You bring the flash drive and all copies to the abandoned paper mill on Route 9. Come alone. You have 3 hours. The call ended. Salvatore lowered the phone slowly, his expression unreadable. It's a trap, Frank stated unnecessarily. Obviously, Salvatore agreed, but one will need to spring. He turned to Rachel, who had overheard everything. We need that flash drive, now. Rachel hesitated only briefly before nodding. It's not far, hidden at a storage facility in Glens Falls, about 30 minutes from here. I'll go with you, Frank offered. Salvatore shook his head. No, you stay with Emma and Lucas. I'll go with Rachel. His tone brooked no argument. If anything happens, get them to the fallback location we discussed. While Rachel gathered her things, Salvatore took Emma aside. If I'm not back in 4 hours, Frank will get you and Lucas to safety. New identities, new location, everything arranged. Emma grasped his arm, surprising them both with the contact. You're planning something reckless. I'm planning to save my daughter and protect my grandson, Salvatore corrected. Whatever that requires. Lucas needs you, Emma said quietly. He's just found you. Don't make him lose you too. The simple plea reached something deep in Salvatore's carefully guarded heart. He covered her hand with his own briefly. I have no intention of dying today, but Sophia comes home no matter what. Saying goodbye to Lucas proved unexpectedly difficult. The boy seemed to sense the gravity of the situation despite the adult's attempts to downplay it. "You'll come back, right, Grandpa?" he asked as Salvatore prepared to leave. Salvatore knelt to Lucas's level, looking directly into those eyes so like Anthony's. "I promise. And then maybe we'll finally get that fishing trip." Lucas nodded solemnly. "I'll practice casting while you're gone." With that simple, ordinary hope for the future hanging between them, Salvatore departed with Rachel, the weight of 3 generations resting on his shoulders. The storage facility was a nondescript collection of metal units surrounded by chain-link fence. Rachel led Salvatore to Unit 117, unlocking it to reveal a space mostly filled with furniture and boxes, the accumulated possessions of a transient life. "It's hidden inside a hollowed-out book," she explained, moving toward a stack of cardboard boxes labeled books. "Old spy trick." Salvatore watched with professional appreciation as she extracted a weathered copy of The Great Gatsby, opening it to reveal a cavity containing a small flash drive. "How many copies?" he asked. "3, Rachel admitted. "One here, one in a safe deposit box in Syracuse, one mailed to a journalist I trust with instructions to open if anything happens to me." "Smart," Salvatore acknowledged. "But now I need all of them." Rachel's expression hardened. "That wasn't our agreement. Circumstances have changed. My daughter's life depends on convincing Langston he has all existing copies. And if I refuse," Salvatore's gaze turned cold. "Don't make me choose between Sarah's sister and Anthony's daughter. You won't like the outcome." The threat hung in the air between them. Rachel studied him, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. "The bank copy we can't get until tomorrow. The journalist copy would take days to retrieve. This will have to do for now." "It will," Salvatore agreed, taking the flash drive and securing it in his pocket. "But understand this, if anything happens to Sophia, because Langston discovers another copy exists, I'll hold you responsible." As they drove back toward the cabin, Rachel broke the tense silence. "You really care about them, don't you, Sophia, Lucas? It's not just about revenge for Anthony." Salvatore kept his eyes on the road. "Family is everything. It always has been, even when I failed to show it." Sarah said Anthony hated that phrase. "Family is everything." He said it was the justification for every terrible thing you did. The observation struck home. Salvatore's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He wasn't wrong. I use family as justification rather than motivation. It's a distinction I've only recently come to understand. When they returned to the cabin, Frank was waiting with grim news. "Langston's men have been spotted in Glens Falls. They're searching methodically, getting closer." "Then we accelerate the timeline," Salvatore decided. "Frank, I need you to make some calls. We're springing the trap, but not the way Langston expects." As Salvatore outlined his plan, Emma watched with growing alarm. "You're deliberately walking into an ambush, hoping your old contacts will show up in time. That's insanity." "It's strategy," Salvatore corrected. "Langston expects the Razor, the retired crime boss who still plays by the old rules. He doesn't expect Salvatore Romano, the grandfather who's learned there are more important things than pride and old vendettas." The distinction seemed lost on Emma, whose concern was evident. "And if your strategy fails," Salvatore's expression remained impassive, "then Frank gets you and Lucas away, and Sophia becomes the head of the Romano family." His gaze shifted to Frank. "You'll see to it." The old consigliere nodded solemnly. "You have my word." With arrangements made and instructions given, Salvatore prepared to depart. He changed into a suit, not the casual attire of recent days, but the formal armor of Salvatore the Razor Romano, the man Langston would expect to see walking into his trap. Lucas watched this transformation with childlike fascination. "You look different, Grandpa." "Just playing a part," Salvatore assured him, "like in your movies." "Are you the hero or the villain in this one?" Lucas asked innocently. The question gave Salvatore pause. "That depends on who's telling the story, I suppose. But today I'm trying to be the hero." As sunset approached, Salvatore stood by his vehicle for a final moment with Emma and Lucas. The boy hugged him fiercely, an unrestrained affection Salvatore hadn't experienced in decades. Emma's embrace was more tentative but equally meaningful. "Bring Sophia home," she whispered. "But come back yourself too. Lucas needs his grandfather." Salvatore nodded, allowing himself one last look at his grandson before driving away. In the rearview mirror, he watched Lucas waving until the cabin disappeared from view. Then he turned his full attention to the road ahead and the confrontation to come. The paper mill loomed against the darkening sky, a hulking silhouette of industrial decay. Salvatore approached with deliberate calm, parking openly in the gravel lot, and exiting his vehicle with unhurried movements. He carried no visible weapon, though the Glock remained holstered under his jacket. Floodlights suddenly illuminated the area, momentarily blinding him. A voice called out from a loudspeaker. "That's far enough, Romano. Hands where we can see them." Salvatore complied, raising his hands shoulder height. "I'm here as agreed, Langston. Where's my daughter?" A figure emerged from the shadows of the loading dock, flanked by armed men. James Langston had aged well, his tall frame still commanding his silver hair perfectly styled. He wore an expensive overcoat against the evening chill, looking more like a CEO than a criminal mastermind. "Salvatore," he greeted with artificial warmth, "you're looking well for a man your age." "Where is Sophia?" Salvatore repeated, ignoring the pleasantries. Langston gestured, and two more men appeared, supporting Sophia between them. Her face was bruised, a cut visible on her forehead, but her eyes blazed with her father's defiance. "Satisfied?" Langston asked. "I'll be satisfied when she walks out of here," Salvatore replied evenly. "I have what you want." He slowly reached into his pocket, extracting the flash drive. "The evidence Sarah Davis so inconveniently preserved," Langston observed. "Toss it over." Salvatore held the drive in his outstretched palm. "Release Sophia first." Langston laughed softly. "You're not exactly in a position to negotiate, old friend, but I'll compromise. Send her halfway." At his nod, the men released Sophia, who stumbled forward, clearly in pain, but moving under her own power. Salvatore gestured for her to continue walking. "The drive first," Langston insisted. Salvatore locked eyes with his daughter, a lifetime of unspoken communication passing between them. Then, with deliberate care, he placed the flash drive on the ground and kicked it toward Langston. "All copies," Langston demanded. "That was the agreement." "That's all of them," Salvatore lied smoothly. "Now let her go." Langston studied him with the calculating gaze of a predator. "You know, I never understood why you retired." The great Salvatore Romano, content to become a legitimate businessman. "It seems such a waste of talent." "I grew tired of the constant looking over my shoulder," Salvatore replied. "Something you might want to consider." Langston's smile never reached his eyes. Cryptic threats. "How disappointing. I expected more creativity from the razor." As they spoke, Sophia continued her slow progress toward her father. When she was nearly to him, Langston gave another, almost imperceptible nod. Everything happened in an instant. One of Langston's men raised his weapon. Salvatore moved with surprising speed for his age, drawing his concealed Glock and pushing Sophia to the ground as gunfire erupted. But the expected bullet never came. Instead, the night exploded with the wail of sirens and blinding lights as FBI vehicles swarmed the perimeter. Agents in tactical gear materialized from multiple directions, weapons trained on Langston and his men. "FBI, drop your weapons on the ground now." Langston's face contorted with fury and disbelief. He lunged for the flash drive, but a shot rang out, sending him crashing to his knees with a bullet in his shoulder. Amid the chaos, Salvatore shielded Sophia with his body until the gunfire ceased. When he looked up, Langston and his men were being handcuffed and loaded into vehicles. An FBI agent approached, removing his tactical helmet to reveal a familiar face. "Right on time, Agent de Moretti," Salvatore observed. "As agreed, Mr. Romano," the agent replied professionally. "We have Langston on attempted murder, kidnapping of an officer of the court, and conspiracy. The evidence on that drive should add quite a bit more." Sophia stared at her father in disbelief. "You called the FBI, you..." Salvatore helped her to her feet, checking her injuries with gentle hands. "I told you I've changed." "But how did you arrange this so quickly?" she pressed, wincing as she stood. "I've been feeding information to Agent Moretti for months," Salvatore admitted. "Ever since I began suspecting certain former associates of illegal activities. Today, I simply accelerated our timeline." As paramedics arrived to attend to Sophia, Salvatore watched Langston being escorted to a transport vehicle. Their eyes met briefly, mutual recognition of a chess game concluded. Langston had expected the old Salvatore, the man who would have brought his crew for a bloody showdown. Instead, he'd encountered a man who had found something more valuable than vengeance, a family worth protecting the right way. "Mr. Romano," Agent Moretti said, reclaiming his attention, "we'll need you to come in for a statement, and we'll want to interview Ms. Reyes and the boy as well once it's safe." Salvatore nodded. "Tomorrow. Tonight I need to get back to my grandson." As the flashing lights receded into the distance, and Sophia was transported to a nearby hospital under FBI protection, Salvatore stood alone in the aftermath of violence averted. The night air felt cleaner somehow, as if a decades-old miasma had finally begun to lift. He pulled out his phone and dialed Frank's number. "It's done," he said simply. "Langston is in FBI custody. Sophia is safe." And Anthony got Frank asked the question carrying all the weight of their shared history. "Justice is coming," Salvatore replied, "the legal kind." There was a pause before Frank spoke again, emotion evident even in his normally controlled voice. He would have approved Salvatore. Anthony would have been proud. As Salvatore drove back toward the cabin where Lucas waited, those words echoed in his mind. Pride from his son had always seemed an impossible dream, a connection severed by misunderstanding and divergent values. Yet somehow, through Lucas, through this crucible of danger and difficult choices, Salvatore had found a path his son might have respected. The cabin lights were visible from a distance, warm beacons in the darkness. As he approached, the door flew open, and Lucas raced out, heedless of the cold Emma close behind. "Grandpa, you're back!" the boy called, practically jumping into Salvatore's arms as he exited the car. Salvatore lifted him with ease, holding him close for a moment before setting him down. "I promised, didn't I?" Emma approached more cautiously. "Sophia, safe, in the hospital with minor injuries." Salvatore met her questioning gaze steadily. "Langston is in FBI custody. It's over." Relief washed over her features, followed quickly by suspicion. "Just like that." Salvatore smiled faintly. "Not exactly. There will be statements to give, evidence to process, a trial eventually. But the immediate danger has passed." Lucas tugged at his grandfather's hand. "Does this mean we can go fishing tomorrow?" The simple question, so ordinary after the night's events, struck Salvatore with unexpected force. This was what Anthony had sought, the normal life unmarked by violence and fear. The quiet joy of fishing with family, of creating memories unburdened by darker concerns. "Yes," Salvatore promised, ruffling the boy's hair gently. "Tomorrow we fish." As they entered the cabin together, Lucas chattering about the fish he'd spotted in the pond, Salvatore felt the weight of the past gradually lifting. Anthony was gone, but his legacy lived on in Lucas. And perhaps through his grandson, Salvatore might finally become the man his son had always hoped he could be. Not the razor, not a crime boss, just a grandfather teaching his grandson to fish on a quiet pond under a peaceful sky.